Today I'm joined by Joel Stransky. Joel has kicked South Africa into the World Cup heaven in 1995, winning the Rugby World Cup for South Africa with the team. Welcome, Joel.
Thank you very much, Christian. Lovely to be with you today.
Joel, for all of us who are not too familiar with rugby, what does rugby mean to South Africa?
So I think the first thing to explain a little bit more about South Africa is we obviously a very multicultural state or republic. We have 11 different official languages. We have different cultures and tribes in this country. So rugby means different things to different segments of our society. And I think if we went back into the past of this country, you would find that rugby was a predominantly white sport, that predominantly Afrikaner white sport, in fact, and obviously only supported by a small minority of the population. But in the last 30 years or so, it has grown enormously and has become, I think in many ways one of our national prides. And I say that because we've gone on in the last 30 years to win the World Cup 3 times. And no other sport in this country has achieved that. So I think when you achieve success, obviously there's a lot more to talk about. There's a lot more to be very proud of. There's a lot more national building that can be done down that. And we know sport is a wonderful conduit to building national positivity and a stronger culture, a much more supportive culture. So rugby's played a major role in our culture in the last little while, but it remains, a small sport in our country. Our biggest sport is still soccer, football by a long way, and rugby will always take a back seat. But I think we're seeing on the back of the success, we're seeing the sport grow.
Yeah. You already touched on a few things I would like to talk about. So looking from the outside in, it seems like South Africa is the only team in Rugby World Cup history who has won with different generations. What I want to mean by that is like 11-15, there was the dominance of the All Blacks. Then in the 90s, the Wallabies. But you guys won middle of the 90s, middle of the 2000s, and now. So what's the strength of South Africa in rugby?
Yeah, so I think it's quite hard to really justify that statement with all respect. So I think when you look at New Zealand dominance in 11-15, the Australian strength in maybe in the 90s, I think you'll find a couple of key elements that remained across that space, that time. Maybe one or two players in pivotal positions that remained the same players, one or two stars that the team was built around. I think if you look at the South African victories, you'll find similar comparisons, but maybe not the same people, if that makes sense. So I think you'll find in every successful team that's won a Rugby World Cup, there's certain positions that are absolutely key in the game of rugby, particularly in World Cup rugby, where it's a much more physical, much harder, much tighter affair, much closer affair. You'll find that some positions become, and I know some of the players wouldn't like to hear it, but some positions become a little more important than others. Tight head prop at the scrum becomes vitally important. The way the halfbacks control the game becomes vitally important. As powerful or smart number 12 becomes important. A kicking fullback becomes important. And I think all those teams had similar characteristics. And I think to look at the South African team that won in 3 different generations, I think you're 100% right. And as much as there were, a couple of players who won in those teams 8 or 12 years apart, whatever it was, the foundation would remain the same. They had strength in some pivotal positions, good decision makers, great leadership, strong coach. There was almost a recipe that defined the ability of that team to succeed and to move forward. But really, I think for me, to answer it in the most simple terms, is that South Africa has a really proud tradition. It's very difficult to defend a World Cup, but that proud tradition of ours means that we keep on fighting, we keep on wanting to win, and through the different generations, we've been very fortunate to achieve that success.
Yeah. And you touched on the history that it was mainly a white Afrikaans sport. Now it has evolved. You have Siya Kolisi, you have Mapimpi, and so it's a more diverse sport. But how was rugby organized in your days? Because you also had Chester Williams, I think is the name, right? So there has also been part of a different culture playing and practicing the sport.
Yeah, so I mean, there's no doubt that there was political segregation prior to the time when I came into the team, and as a result, there probably wasn't. And linked to that, before I get onto that, linked to that, I guess was opportunity. There was limited opportunity for players who were non-white, and by opportunity, you can define that in many ways. But it's not just opportunity to play the sport, but it's opportunity to have a healthy diet, to have access to training facilities, to have access to top coaches. So it was. There's no doubt it was much harder, if not impossible, for some kids to come through the ranks and compete with, big, powerfully built global rugby players of that stature. So as much as in 1995, Chester Williams was there, and there were a couple of other black players playing at the highest level in this country, maybe not for the test side. It was unbelievable that Chester was there. He came from a disadvantaged background. For him to have risen and played at that level was incredible. And then I think through as we progressed deeper down the line of a full democracy and more equal opportunity and I guess from a playing perspective, not just access to the facilities and the coaching staff, but also access to financial support and means and meals and learning ability. I think we see a lot of the young guys coming through today, and to be fair, some of them still come from impoverished backgrounds. Mapimpi and Siya Kolisi come from very poor and impoverished backgrounds, so those are the two guys that you mentioned. There's others there that went to private schools and who've benefited enormously from opportunity, but still, it's not an easy ask for kids of color to come through the ranks at the moment and to achieve rugby at the highest level.
Yeah, okay. Let's talk about the 1995 Rugby World Cup. I mean, it was an historic moment, not only in rugby history, but in world history, right? A movie has been made around that Rugby World Cup. In very few words, South Africa wasn't allowed to play at the international scene for a few years. So it was the first World Cup South Africa could participate. Plus, Nelson Mandela used rugby as one of the means to unite the country. So, going into the World Cup, what was your expectation as a team, and you as Joel, what was your expectation going into the World Cup?
So, I mean, the first thing I would really clarify is that as a young rugby player, you're aware of the political circumstances, of course. You're aware of a little bit what's going on around you behind the scenes. But ultimately, your goal is to go out between the four lines and play the game. I mean, that's the absolute reality. We were young rugby players who just wanted to go out there and play the game to the best of our ability. We wanted to go out and make our family, our friends, and our country proud. And if we could succeed and win the World Cup, it would have been fantastic. And obviously, our goal was to win it. But you don't really think about that last game. You think about the journey along the way. You think about the first game. You think about how the baby steps to get there. And fortunately, the rugby all went quite well and according to plan. But pre the World Cup, if someone had said our efforts on the field would play such a major role in uniting a nation, we would have, not really dreamt of that and thought of that or considered that even. It was wonderful for us to meet Madiba and to spend time with him and for him to, tell us how important our efforts were and for him to commit to us to say that he would have the whole nation supporting us. I mean, that was all absolutely incredible. But really, at the end of the day, it's only in retrospect that you realize the impact we made on this country. And even then, not, an impact that lasted in perpetuity. It was an impact that brought us all together, and then forces and other elements, carry on, dividing. And unfortunately, it's the nature of our society, and it'll always be like that. Well, well, certainly in our generation, my generation will always be like that. But it was a journey that we're all unbelievably proud of, and to have been a part of it was incredibly special. But to your point, Christian, the most important thing there was Madiba and how he used it to unite a nation. The fact that he wore the Springbok shirt, much to the criticism of some of his ANC, comrades, and he came out and drove the support for this predominantly white rugby team was absolutely the height of courage and bravery and political astuteness, I guess.
Yeah. And going into the World Cup, how important was the first match? You guys faced the reigning world champion, the Wallabies, the Australian team. You were the man of the match. You scored a few goals. How important was that win?
So I think in any World Cup, it's mightily important to get off to a winning start, but more importantly, it's how you approach it. For us, we trained in the whole build-up to that World Cup. We trained to beat Australia. I think as defending champions, you train to go in and defend your title. That opening game is one step along your journey. For us, our journey was only Australia. We decided we would contemplate everything after that game. So I think our focus was good. Our preparation was fantastic. We played really well on the day. To play that game in Cape Town, which is a multicultural rugby supporting city, was even more important and more supportive, and even bigger for our cause. So that was great, and obviously it set us on the right path, And then I think coming back to Madiba, before that game, flew into our training camp and came and wished us luck and committed to us. He would have the support of the nation. He arrived on the day and supported us in the stadium. We had this massive groundswell of public support. It just set our journey, and it set the journey of a country through the course of a Rugby World Cup on the right journey, on the right platform. So it was mightily important, and thank goodness it went well.
Yeah. If we are progressing to the semi-final, I saw in a documentary prior to this interview that there was heavy rain.
Yeah.
And then according to the rules, if the match can't be played on the day, the team with the worst disciplinary record is out, which was you, because you had the South Africa, which had a fight in the quarterfinal, I think. And I saw that even the captain, Francois Pina, wasn't aware of that situation. So how did you deal with it when you found out that you might be out of the tournament without playing the semi-final?
Yeah, so our disciplinary issues, it wasn't a quarterfinal. It was in the pool stages against Canada. We had a player sent off and a couple players sent home. We had what was commonly known as the Battle of Boet Erasmus, which was the name of the stadium.
I saw that.
So I think, I can only really speak from a personal perspective, because we arrived at the ground thinking the game was going ahead. And only when we got to the ground, an hour and a half before the supposed kickoff time did we realize that there was a bit of an issue and that there was a delay. And so in that preparation, you don't really consider things like that. And when you get to the ground, I'm the type of person that looks at it and goes, well, it's out of my control, it's out of my influence. The only thing I can do is make sure that when we do run on, if we run on, I'm ready and I can go and deliver the best that I'm capable of delivering. So I was quite calm. In fact, I often laugh with one of the reporters who I sat chatting to for a little while. He couldn't believe how calm I was. But you don't really have a choice, do you? You take it in and you hope for the best, and you deal with what you can deal with. And that's what we did as a team. We tried to stay calm. We dealt with the delay in the change room. We relaxed. We chilled. We read. We did whatever we could do just to help the time go by while they tried to drain the field as best they could. And I think to that point, maybe the powers that be in this country were more aware of it than we were, because they did absolutely everything they could to get the water off the field and make sure the game went ahead. And fortunately, it did.
Yeah. Talking about the other semi-final, Jonah Lomu, who is considered one of the best rugby players in history, he kind of destroyed the English team. What was your South Africa Springboks plan to stop him in the final?
So, the first thing that happened is we that semi-final was in Durban, and we flew back to Johannesburg that night on a delayed flight, because we obviously wanted to get back to altitude and not have the impact of altitude. The guys who lived in Joburg went home on Sunday, And some of us watched that game together as Jonah Lomu destroyed England. Some of us, some from the coast that was in the hotel. And it was hard watching it because New Zealand was so good. They were unbelievable, and Jonah just destroyed them. And obviously the foundation was good that allowed him to destroy them. But we were watching that thinking, oh my goodness, this is going to be really tough. This is virtually impossible. And the first thing that happened is Kitch Christie, the coach, was watching with us as much as he lived in Joburg. He stayed in the hotel with us. And at the end of the game, he rewound the tape and he watched it again. And then he stood up and he said, no, we can beat these guys. And I think that was the first step to beating them, because at that point, if there'd been any doubt as to our ability to beat them, if the coach believed we could, we believed we could. And then from there, we formulated our plan. We changed our defensive structure a little just to make sure we had bigger numbers on Jonah. We looked at how we could get big guys to tackle him, because you wanted him running into the areas where the big guys were. You didn't want him having a one-on-one with a smaller guy. And most importantly, we then said, the key, the foundation is to not let him get his hands on the ball. It's to arrange our defensive structure that we pushed their other ball carriers, in closer to the numbers so that he didn't get his hands on the ball. He got his hands on the ball in the first few minutes a few times, but we made some good tackles. And then there's another element to that. It's about its attitude. It's about, a dogged mentality about saying, it doesn't matter how big this guy is, how strong he is, how good his feet are, how good his game is. He is not scoring against us. We adopted that attitude, every single one of us. And when one of us missed a tackle, someone else made the tackle. And I think that was an attitude to playing against the great Jonah. And you were right. He's probably the greatest player that's ever played the game. He was certainly the greatest icon that the game has ever seen. And our attitude towards him ensured that, and sadly, I guess in a way, he never ever scored a try against South Africa. You know that, and that's not in the World Cup, not in any game post the World Cup, and that really is, I guess, the result of this South African ability to up their game and say, right, we are so determined, we are not going to allow this giant to come and score against us, and that was, a massive deciding factor in the game.
Yeah, I saw that one, because also then if you look at the clips, there was the haka before the match, and then Lomu really got into the face of Kobus Wiese, I think, was it?
Wiese, yeah.
And he was not impressed at all. So that was
he
pretty
wasn't,
cool.
And I mean, when you see that, you can see how big Lomu was, because he was looking Kobus in the eye. He's a second row, and he was a big man. He was big, tall. He was massively built. He weighed, close to 117, I think 120 kilograms. And linked to that, he had pace and a great skill set, and an absolute icon. And I might add as well, one of the nicest men you'll ever meet. And I think that's important. We always look at him as being this giant of the game, this giant of a human being. But he was a gentle soul and a wonderful man. And to spend time with him, post Rugby World Cup was special. And I was privileged to do that, to get to know him a little bit. A very, very kind and very good man.
Yeah. And now we're progressing to the final of the World Cup. The match was tight. It went into overtime. So yeah. What are your reflections now, 25 years later, 25 years later on the final?
So I think the first, when I look back, there's like a little chronological element of key things that happened that will live with me forever. And the first thing was Nelson Mandela came into our change room before the game and wished us luck. And the way he wished us luck wasn't just walk in, good luck, guys. He came to every single one of us and had a personal message and shook our hands and touched us with the Madiba magic, And I think that was the first thing. We were so inspired. You don't need extra motivation for a Rugby World Cup final, but to be touched by his magic, to be inspired by that great man who'd been through so much for our country was just incredible. And then it was hard fought and it was tight and it was, everything you want in a Rugby World Cup final. It was close. I think when we got to full time, one of the foundations of our game plan, of our strategy had been fitness. We knew we were one of the fittest teams at the World Cup. And, Kitch Christie, our coach, said to us, he said, this works for us now. We've got there's 20 minutes left. We're much fitter than them. We're going to win this now, and we went from there into a place where, we we dominated. I think in that extra time, at times during normal time, we were maybe a little fortunate. Andrew Mittens missed a drop goal. Jonah nearly scored. To be fair, we had a try disallowed, which I think probably was a try. But in the extra time, I think we got stronger and stronger, and they showed signs of fading a little. So altogether it was a day where any team could have won it on the day. I think you needed a little bit of luck. Andrew Mertens missed an easy drop goal towards the end of normal time, which would have won it for them. But we found a way to win it, and that's the sign of a good team.
Yeah. And then the famous drop goal, I looked at it a couple of times. It was such a clean strike. You must have been in the zone.
It was, and I lovingly and laughingly talk about it, and that I wish I could have kicked all the kicks in my career as well as that one. You're right. It was a really sweet strike, and it comes on the back of hours and hours of hard work and training. But to get it right in the moment at the time is obviously a bit of luck involved again, and obviously a special moment. But Kitch Christie, the coach, and again, I keep talking about him. He was a really astute man and a really smart coach. He said to me on I think that Wednesday afternoon, the forwards were doing some line-out practice, and I'd gone with to do some extra kicking. And he said to me, "Why don't you kick more drop goals?" He said it's it's the easiest form of points in the game, particularly in a tight game. And so he planted the seed. And Wednesday afternoon at training, I kicked a few and practiced a bit. On Thursday, a little bit more. On Friday at the captain's run and the kicking session, I kicked a lot, and I was striking them really beautifully. And when we got in the game, Ellis Park is such a wonderful stadium, and the surface is so good. It's always nice to kick there. And if you drop it right and you kick it right, it goes where you want it to go. There's no deviation up here at altitude. So it was a special. It's always nice, isn't it, to have a special personal moment in a team environment that has achieved something so great. And I'm blessed to have had my moment on a big great day.
Yeah, believe that. Out of personal interest, how different is kicking a rugby ball from kicking a soccer ball?
So it's a great question. It's a great question. So if you can kick a soccer ball well, almost perfectly, it's a whole lot easier to kick a rugby ball, because a soccer ball is round. It curls, and people don't always understand why it curls. It curls for the same reason that airplanes fly. It's called lift, and it curls because of high pressure, low pressure cells around the spinning of a ball. And it's the same thing that keeps an airplane in the air. If you can control the lift of a soccer ball and kick it perfectly, to kick a rugby ball is not that difficult. So I used to practice quite often kicking with a soccer ball, because if you can kick it perfectly, then to kick the rugby ball is a little bit easier.
Yeah. In preparation for this interview, I looked at quite a few videos of you kicking a ball, and I thought to myself, Joel must be able to kick a football very well as well.
So ironically, I had a knee injury that finished my rugby career when I was 31, and I thought I'd had a few years left to play. But once the bones in my knee, solidified and went hard again, and I was able to run and kick a little bit, I started playing Veterans League soccer here in Johannesburg with some of the former pros, and I loved it. I played for 5 or 6 years. It was great fun. It's a great sport, that, by the way.
Yeah, cool. So let's start with a bit more challenging questions. I let you answer the next question in whatever shape or form, because I think there's no right answer.
Yep.
There is a so-called controversy around the Rugby World Cup, especially around the final. Some people say the New Zealanders were poisoned. How do you look at this? And just give us your point of things, because you can look up in the internet, you find you find so many opinions.
Yeah.
Just tell us yours.
So for me, firstly, I would say I doubt very much. In fact, I'd say it's almost virtually impossible that someone poisoned them on purpose. So that I think you can discard and throw away. I think 1 or 2 of them, or 3 or 4 of them, I don't know how many, may well have gone out and eaten something that they probably shouldn't have, and they may have had a mild bout of food poisoning, but from what I understand, they had it earlier in the week, and by the final, they may not have been at the absolute best, but they were strong enough to take to the field, which means Cowboys shouldn't really cry, should they? So it is what it is, and ultimately it's not something that's in any of our control. We can only judge what happened on the day. There wasn't one of their players on the day that looked like they were, crawling around on the field looking for water and spare food, and looking really weak. They all played, to the best of their ability, and I'm sure the players themselves are certainly not using that as an excuse.
Yeah, I guess there are always these things out there, right? Also the fight between Foreman and Muhammad Ali. Also, some people say that Foreman got some water or something like this, right? So it comes back in sporting history.
Again, in that fight, he didn't look exactly incapacitated, did he? So, it's...
exactly, right?
in the record books, it is what it is. It's almost... in fact, I guess we laugh about it and joke about it more than we discuss it seriously. But, at the end of the day, it is what it is.
Yeah. Joel, in your athletic life, what was your darkest moment?
Yeah, so I think, look, as a sportsman, every time you get dropped or left out of a team, every time you play badly, it's a dark moment. Some injuries are dark moments, and if I look back, I think like any sportsman, there's probably not one that is worse than any other one. There's a few for me that I look back on and think, sure, but if I'd done things differently, it may have been, it may have had an outcome that was less of a dark moment. And I mean, when I was a schoolboy, I didn't make the South African schools team in my second year. I made it when I was younger, and when I should have made it, I didn't. That for me was a massive disappointment. I missed out, and that would probably be my biggest moment. And actually, it's probably not one that was really in my hands, because I actually think I played quite well in the build-up to it. But I never made the Springbok touring side to go to New Zealand in 1994, and that's certainly my biggest regret. And I would love to have toured New Zealand as a Springbok on a long tour, and that was a 6 or 7 week tour, and I didn't go on that tour. It was the only one I missed out in my Springbok career. Yeah, that would be the regret. I mean, I've fallen off my mountain bike and smashed myself up, and that obviously is something I look back on, and the recovery from one or two falls is tough. But to have missed touring New Zealand is, yeah, that would be it.
Yeah. When I did my research, I found out a few players had to leave or were dropped from the team or left the team in 1996, the Springbok team.
Yeah.
You were one of them, and Francois Pienaar also. What happened?
So we had a new coach who was the new broom that swept clean. And I think I don't think he got on with the leadership of that team that came out of the 95 squad. It was guys who'd achieved a lot, guys who we were mentally tough. We had strong opinions. It was also part of that journey was the adoption or the conversion into a professional entity, and money became an issue, and payment, and the players' representation was not respected by that new coach. And look, to be fair about the new coach, his name was Andre Markgraaff. He didn't last very long because he was caught with making racial comments in an interview, and got didn't last too long after that. I don't think he did what was best for South African rugby at the time, but bearing in mind as a player, if the coach doesn't want you there, you have no choice then but to go play the game in another way. And both Francois and I headed off to England and played in the UK. And I don't regret that at all. I do look back on it and think, the fact that we were left out and were part of the few players that left the team at the time, or were forced to leave the team at the time, was a loss to the team, and in some ways a blessing in disguise for us, but certainly part of life and part of the journey of rugby in this country.
Yeah, because when I did my research, I just thought it's strange that two of the key players, just 1 year out of the World Cup win had to leave the team. So, but okay, you answered that. If we haven't already talked about it, what was your best moment?
I think we've spoken about it, and again, I think when you look back on your career, it is a journey filled with highlights, and every great moment along the way at that point was a wonderful moment for you, and there were lots, for me as a player. I played for the Natal Sharks. We won the Currie Cup for the first time in the Sharks' history in 1990. It was an unbelievable moment for all of us. To win the Rugby World Cup in 1995 is undoubtedly the highlight. But even after that, there were some great moments. To achieve great success with the Leicester Tigers, special moments. But if there were one defining moment, it would have to be 1995. And not just for the rugby reasons, for Nelson Mandela as well. It was such a great time for us as a country, such a unifying process where sport played such a major role. And you touched on the movie Invictus. That movie was about Madiba and what he did to bring a nation together using sport and a team as a conduit. I think for every sportsman, you would love to achieve something great, but to achieve it outside of rugby and play a role outside of just sport is something phenomenal and for us, it's something we're incredibly proud of again.
Yeah, I believe that. If you could travel back in time and meet a younger Joel, what advice would you give him?
So I think, again, it's a good question, because the younger Joel was I think at times probably a little lazy, didn't always, want to put in the extra hours and the hard work. I think there were distractions for the younger Joel. I was a young guy, grew up in an environment where we had a lot of fun off the field, and maybe I would have given myself the advice that you've got to make maybe couple more sacrifices than I did, and that would have been, maybe spending, maybe attending one or two parties less than I did, and spending a little bit more time maybe perfecting some of the arts of training. And I think that was it. I think as you get older, you get wiser and you learn. And right now, where I am as someone who took up mountain biking 10 years ago, and I think right now I understand my body a whole lot more than I understood my body back then. Maybe it's access to data and knowledge, but I certainly understand my body a whole lot better. I train a whole lot harder. And I think if I were to give myself some advice, it would have been, I was always dedicated and always trained hard, but I think I could have maybe trained a little harder.
Cool. What are the habits that make you a successful athlete and person?
So undoubtedly training hard. I mean, it just goes back to that. So the harder you train, the more you believe in yourself, the more mentally strong you are, the better off you are physically. What makes me a better person is the fact that I'm unbelievably dedicated to everything I do now. To our businesses, I'm dedicated to my mountain biking. I'm dedicated, and even above all of that, to my family. I'm dedicated. And I think you pick your causes and be completely focused and dedicated to those causes. And obviously, you have to manage time between the causes. You can't be, completely dominated by one cause and one cause only. But for me, it's about what you put in is what you get out, and it's the secret. It's the one thing I will always say to every young player, young child that I mentor or train or coach or have time to discuss with. It is absolutely about putting in as much as you can, because that defines exactly what you get out.
Yeah. And I've taken a note for a little bit later, but you just touched on it. I heard you talk about it 2 times in other interviews. Your coach, Kit Christie, told you guys the fittest team will win the World Cup. And then you also outlined that hard work builds confidence, confidence builds self-belief, and it creates a virtuous cycle.
Yeah.
Would you mind expanding on it?
Yeah, so I think, so I'll tell you, just to go back a little bit about Kit Christie. We started training for the Rugby World Cup, which began towards the end of May in 1995. We started training as a collective, probably in the January, and it was a big squad that slowly got whittled down until eventually, the final 26 was announced. at one of those training sessions towards the end of January or early February, and understand, we would fly up from Cape Town and join the squad on Monday morning, and we'd go home Monday night late, and we'd be absolutely exhausted from a huge day of training. And a lot of it was fitness. And I said to him one evening, in the dying moments of the training session, when I was lying there doing sit-ups and press-ups, and as I said earlier, I didn't really enjoy that real hard work at the time. I said to him, Coach, I said, we're doing all this fitness training, and you're killing us here on the field from a fitness perspective. Surely we should be doing more skill and more of the rugby skill sets, because this most skillful team will win the World Cup. And he said to me, no, my boy. He said, you need to understand one thing. At this Rugby World Cup in 1995, the fittest team will win the World Cup. And it wasn't only about fitness. I think for him then, as we went along that journey, it meant that when you're extremely fit, you are by nature a more skillful player, because your skill levels don't drop when you're tired. You are able to execute those skill levels for longer during the game. To your point, it grows that cycle of being able to work harder, do more, grow more in terms of your confidence and your self-belief, achieve more, and continue that perpetual upward cycle, that upward growth. And I think that's the nature of life. It's not just a sporting thing. It's the story of everything we do. If you work harder in your marriage or with your children or in your business, you get better at it. You believe more. If those around you believe more, you become more gelled as a unit, and you're more likely to achieve results. And even in our businesses, I tell all our different heads of our businesses, you can have the greatest concept and the greatest idea in the whole world. If you have average people, you will fail. It's all about the people and the people's attitude and the people's belief system. And if you've got great people, you can achieve anything, even if the concept idea is average. With great people and that great attitude, you will achieve greatness. And Kitch, in his own way, imparted that belief system on all of us in that team.
Yeah, there's also that saying, what you just said, in business, it's like 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration, or something like this, which outlines that concept as well.
Yeah. So I do a little bit of work on TV, and in TV, there's a great little saying: if you fail to prepare to fail, and that really is the story of life.
Do you have a morning routine?
So I do. I very much have a morning routine. It's not exactly the same every morning, but it is very similar. So Monday is my rest day, and when I say rest day, I might go and do a. So in my last 10 years, I do endurance sports. So it's long distance, multi-stage mountain biking. I've done 3 or 4 full Ironmans. I've done, I don't know how many half Ironmans. But for me, the mountain bike is the focus. So Monday is a rest day. If I might go for a 1.5 kilometer swim, or maybe a 2K swim on a Monday evening. But my routine really is get up every morning at about 5. I train on the bicycle or the indoor trainer, normally from about 6 until upper 7, 8, sometimes a bit longer. Wednesday would be the same. Sometimes I'll do, cross training session Tuesday evening or Thursday evening as well. Friday it's a little easier. So Friday morning would be maybe mountain biking skills or a light ride. And Saturday, we go ride 3 to 4 hours, and Sunday 3 to 4 hours. And the routine's always the same. If it's a longer ride, I'll have some breakfast and then I'll go train. If it's a short ride, I won't have breakfast and I'll go train. Come back, get in, shower, get dressed, get into the office, or get online and work from home for a while. Maybe a second session in the evening. And every evening I sit at the table and have dinner with my wife. And if my kids are around, they join us for dinner. But if not, it's, the two of us have dinner together every single evening when we're together. And we watch a bit of TV afterwards, and we have a good night's sleep, and we try and make sure whatever time we have is quality time, irrespective of whether it's quality training, quality resting, or quality together.
That's really cool. How do you prepare yourself for important moments?
So I think all important moments, I think there is definitely a recipe to that, isn't there? It's about understanding what the moment is. It's about understanding who the people are in that moment with you are, and ensuring you understand their desires, their goals, and their aims within that moment. And if you turn that into a business meeting, I would always research the people I'm meeting with, whether it's someone we're selling to or someone who's selling to me. Understand what their desire is, what is a good outcome for them. If there is a way of understanding that our outcomes can be achieved by working together, then it's important to maybe analyze what that outcome is so you can have a meeting of the minds. If it's a matter of being a service provider, try and meet, understand what their needs are and try and do, some sort of needs analysis and meet their needs. And likewise for someone who's selling to us, always want it to be a fair end result. If it can't be and we can't come to terms, then, you need to accept that as well. But for me, it is always about saying, if you are thoroughly prepared and you understand the objectives of the other party, you have a much better chance of succeeding in that meeting.
Yeah. How do you overcome setbacks?
So the first thing is to understand that we all have setbacks. I tease my wife, she, and I shouldn't really say this, but I tease her because we have the odd glass of wine together, and I tease her that she's a raging alcoholic and that she must admit that she is. And I know she's not, but the point is, if you need to understand firstly that we have setbacks, that setbacks are part of the everyday dealing of life. If everything went perfectly swimmingly well and according to plan, everyone would be multimillionaires. We'd all win World Cups every single week, and no one would ever experience failure. Failure is an everyday occurrence, and we need to understand that. If you understand that you are going to fail and you're going to have setbacks, it's a whole lot easier to deal with them. That's the first thing. And then in terms of dealing with them, it's to know that, every setback is one step closer to a success, and you got to just get up and you got to understand what went wrong in that failure, analyze it, deal with it, and then put it in the past. Because if you carry on, if you carry on living in that setback moment, you will only just create the next setback. You've got to put it behind you, learn from it, and move forward. And if you can understand what went wrong, you'll be better prepared for the next challenge.
Yeah. Who is your role model and why?
So when I was growing up, my role model, the sports person I looked up to with the most admiration was Michael Jordan, the basketballer. And it was a real simple thing. He wasn't the biggest or tallest basketballer on the court. He probably wasn't the fastest, but he was undoubtedly the best. And he was the best because I think he worked the hardest. He ensured he had the greatest skill levels. He dominated a team sport in a way that no other basketballer ever had, and he wasn't the biggest guy around in a sport where height was a massive advantage. And he had this wonderful attitude where, and it comes back to your previous question about dealing with failure. He said every shot, every hoop he missed was just one step closer to getting the next one in. And he had, when I do motivational talks, I quote him a lot. He talks about failure. He talks about coming back from failure. He talks about, if you don't try, you'll never succeed. For me, he just embodied everything I wanted to be as a rugby player. I wanted to be the best I possibly could be in my position in the game of rugby. And he did that unbelievably well, sensationally well. And by all accounts, understanding in his sport, you needed to be massively tall. You needed to be nimble. He was nimble, but he certainly wasn't the tallest. And he dominated in the way that no one ever did, and quite possibly in a way that no one ever has since. So he was certainly my life icon when in sport. And then as a fly off, as a number 10, Nas Botha was a number 10 in this country who was just sensational in the way he controlled the game and dominated the field for for Northern Transvaal and the Blue Bulls. And I always wanted to be able to kick the ball as well as he did. I wanted to tackle better than he did, but he just controlled things superbly. So he was, my number 10 icon when I was growing up.
Yeah, really cool. You have mentioned the name Nelson Mandela a couple of times, how he influenced the team, and you have met him as a player, but you also met him as a person. I heard you were invited for dinner to his place.
Lunch. Yeah, lunch to his house. Yeah.
How can you describe him?
So you know, if you said to me outside of sport, who's the person in the world you admire the most, it would undoubtedly be Madiba, you know, and to have got to know him a bit, to have spent time with him, to have been at his house and had lunch with him, it was just incredibly special. And I think when you get to spend time with a man like that in an environment where it's a little more relaxed and it's you can just chat about the value systems and what drove him to be the man he became and was, what molded him into this incredible leader, what molded him into this man who didn't carry a grudge, who could have been so angry. He was just the most sensational man. And my wife and I, to have had lunch with him at his house with just 5 of us at the table, and to have a normal Sunday lunch, if anything could be normal, you know, in his company, was just incredible. And to have then cross paths with him and to have spend more time with him post that at, you know, in functions, dinners, and got to know him, a really, really special man. And I think the critical thing for me about him and why I have so much respect for him and why I had so much love for him was the value system. You know, he had such strong values, and of those values, he was a man who could have, as I said, he could have been angry, he could have been, he could have looked, you know, for justice and revenge, and all he wanted was to do what was best for this country and to secure a peaceful transition with his big, open and kind heart. You know, it was a man who just drew you in, and you couldn't but love and respect Nelson Mandela.
Really cool. What is the best advice you received, and who gave it to you?
So there's been a number of coaches who said to me in life that the crux is to be the best you possibly can be, and I think that is the advice that Madiba even portrayed in his own way. You know, he always there's so many wonderful quotes that he came up with, but I think if you think of the ones that really matter, it was always about being the best version of you could possibly be, and for me that is the advice I would impart on any youngster, any person out there. You know, it's easy to criticize others, it's easy to look for excuses, but if you go out there and you do your best at training, you do your best in the preparation, and when you're on the park or you're living life, if you are the best possible version of yourself, that's all anyone can ever ask of you. You know, we're not all the most multi-talented, we're not all the smartest, we're not all going to be the best, but if we can be the best version of ourselves, then we've achieved the best that we possibly can achieve, and who can ask more of you than that?
Yeah, absolutely. Back in the days, how did a typical training day look like?
So I think our rugby training days, you know, probably there were 2 different versions, one before professionalism and one post the conversion into, or the evolution into the professional era. Before, it was really a matter of doing your own gym session, or if you wanted to do that, it was about going to work, or going to, you know, university and studying, and then going to training in the evening. Post the advent of professionalism, it was a little more organized, and maybe that's probably the most relevant way to look at it. Is our week would be, and particularly at the Leicester Tigers, where I experienced, you know, the first real professional days, we would have a recovery session on a Sunday in the swimming pool, lots of stretching, lots of massage, physio. Monday we would have maybe either a light recovery gym session, but certainly a gym session, maybe a light run, stretch. Tuesday would be the fitness day, or, a double session, skills in the morning and individual skills or unit skills in the afternoon. Wednesday would always be the most physical day of the week, with a big defensive structure, and again, another gym session. Thursday was most weeks our day off, and it was a recovery day. Friday, captain's run, maybe, 1 or 2 extra skills if you needed it. And Saturday was match day, so the week was a pretty full week. Monday would also include after your recovery session, after your lighter session, we would do video analysis. We would look at ourselves and we would look at the opposition. We'd meet, later on Monday and decide how we wanted to play against our next week opposition, and we would formulate our plan, and then the week's training would be based on that plan. So quite time intensive, quite physically intensive, but quite balanced as well.
Yeah, cool. After your sporting career, you co-founded the Pivotal Group. It sounds pretty interesting what you're doing. It's dedicated to disruption and innovation. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so after my sporting career, I coached a little bit and then decided it wasn't really where I wanted to be. And so I got involved in the corporate world, had a few corporate positions, a couple of big corporate jobs, and then decided to go on my own and with a partner, and which turned out to be 3 partners, really. There's 4 of us involved in this business. So really we use that slogan disruptive as a form of describing the technology space we started in and that we've predominantly played in. I think all the big technology players in the last 10 years have been disruptive and have created new revenue streams in different areas. And I mean, there's some wonderful examples that we quote when we look at what we're doing. A company like Uber is the biggest taxi company in the world, doesn't own a taxi. Bookings.com, the biggest hotel group in the world, doesn't own a bedroom. It's a way of thinking differently. Our space has always been more in the call center space. We enable call centers. We build their telephony platforms either on premise or in the cloud. We enable their call center agents to work remotely if necessary, particularly during COVID. We allow people to trade by using voice authentication as a security platform. And then from that, we've expanded into, some data analytics, some other elements for our clients that we manage, from security and cleaning to facilities management to building their facilities. So it's really started and fundamentally grown out of the call center industry, but it's grown a bit beyond that. So we have 9 companies in our stable now. The latest one is actually slightly growing into the healthcare space, which I think is the new future disruptive space, from whether it's doctors on call, telephony consultations, or hybrid of that going forward. We want to play in that space a little bit now. We're not a big group. I think we employ about 450 people now, which maybe is a lot, but we prefer not to have more people. We prefer to have more play in the tech space. And we like to think, like all businesses, we've got some companies right and we've got some that are not doing as well and we've got it wrong. But that's part of life. As I said earlier, you can't succeed at everything, and you will have these hurdles along the way.
Yeah. And did your experience as an athlete has helped? Because when you're disrupting, you need to look at voids and making things better. Essentially, as an athlete, you have to do that 24/7. Has that helped?
Very much so. And I think especially the game of rugby, because rugby is not something that's predictable. There's no set pattern. If I hit the ball in the rough, as a golfer, I'm going to hit it back on the fairway and then go for the green again. Rugby's fluid and constantly evolving and constantly changing. And that's not just from week to week playing against different teams. It's minute to minute in a game, So you've got to have this ability to adapt quickly and evolve fast. And I think that's really where we see ourselves. It's really where we've seen our business, in that we've tried to make sure that our short, medium, and long-term plans are all quite short and all very or designed in a way that is conducive to managing change. And I think that's the key to business in the modern environment in particular. And we've seen it in the last 14 months with COVID having come along, and how those companies who have been able to adapt and who've been able to be a little bit more flexible in their approach have survived, and those who've not have gone by the wayside. And as hard as it's been for some people, others have benefited during this tough time. So I'd like to think we are. I don't think we've benefited enormously, but we've certainly managed to survive and come out a little bit stronger.
Yeah. And now it comes full circle. If I'm not mistaken, when I did my research, that famous drop goal was also some form of it was not the plan, initially, because you
No, it
saw
wasn't the plan.
the others lining up and then you had to change the course of action in a split of a second.
Yeah, and I think to go back, in terms of preparation, as much as we had some great outside running backs, Kitch Christie, as I said to you, had planted the seed about kicking more drop goals. And so that seed was there. So when we lined up at that scrum, we didn't just have one option. We had a number of options. The option that we called was to attack down the blind side with an incredible little move. And I don't want to go into too much technical detail, but we had really good outside backs. We had some strong, big, powerful forwards, and that move involved, the number 8 picking and going, speed of the scrum off, me as a dummy runner on the inside, hopefully freeing some space on the outside, and sending those fast, fluid runners into scoring a try that would have sealed the game. But when I looked up and I saw how the All Blacks were lined up to defend, they were very, very, very much aware of what we were going to do. And so, we changed the call, and I said to Jos van der Westhuizen, the scrum half, I said, got to change it, send the ball back. There's opportunity for the drop kick rather. And, we played and trained a lot together, and we all had faith in each other, and he changed the call, and we went for the drop. But fortunately it went over, because if it hadn't gone over, we may be having a different discussion right now.
Yeah. So we're coming to the end of the interview. Do you want to nominate someone to be interviewed?
I would love to nominate someone. I just need to think about exactly who I would like to nominate. Strategically, I think as a coach now more so than as a player, I'm quite interested to learn from guys who've been through good time and hardships as coaches. So I would, sure. So let me think about, I'm sorry to stall you here a little bit, and let me think about this for a second. I would nominate Pep Guardiola.
Oh, that's interesting. That's cool.
So there's a man. So it was, for me, it was between him and Jurgen Klopp and maybe Lance Armstrong. But I would nominate Pep because he's achieved such great success with a number of different teams. He's had to go through the low of a bad Man City season and come back again. And I think he understands what it takes to go full circle and achieve something, see the toughness of trying to defend it and get back and achieve it again. I think that would be a great journey to learn about.
Really cool. Where can people find you?
So people can find me on Twitter at Stranners. I'm on Instagram, but I'm not a big Instagrammer, and I'm not big on the Facebook side. Or they can find me in my world of business, which is at Pivotal, probably easiest, pivotaldata.co.za. That's our biggest business, or pivotalgroup.co.za.
Really cool. Joel, thanks a lot for your time. It was absolutely awesome.
Christian, been lovely chatting. Thank you for inviting me to be on your show. I really appreciate it. It's been great fun chatting. And I think to that point, what's always nice about these type of interactions, as nice as it is for others, for me as a person, it's also quite nice to be introspective, to sit here and talk about it again and start thinking, geez, you know what, I've got to, these little things I'll take out of this that will make me a better person going forward too.